welcome back for another show of conversations where we have conversations. Yeah, that's what we do here. One of the things that I have discovered about conversations is that it gives us an opportunity to broaden our minds. And today we are talking about a different kind of mind, AI, artificial minds, but we're equally going to increase our perspectives around AI because this isn't the only show talking about AI right now. There's many conversations happening about AI. What we're going to focus on today is the concept of AI alignment. And so I'm going to get my lovely guest, Lee, to give you a little more insight into exactly what that means. But for those of you who are new, or for those of you who are not new, this is a conversation for all of us. And so if you're here watching live, say hello, get in the chat, share your perspectives, ask your questions. This is an opportunity for us all to broaden our minds through conversation so that we can have a better view of what is out there and we can make better decisions on what we want to do in terms of actions because we've thought things through in a more robust way. So let's get kicked off with an introduction to Lee. So Lee, can you tell us who you are and why AI alignment was something that you're so passionate about? Or is, not was, is.
Is and was and will be. Yeah. Yeah, no, thanks, Tracy. So I'm Lee Gaul. It says right down here, right there.
I'm the worst at that on this.
Yeah, I can't do that. Just yeah. So I am really passionate about AI. I have been for many years. It really started back in college when I was studying philosophy and thinking about the mind and all these different kind of ideas around the mind, and inevitably got into the idea of artificial intelligence and studying a little bit about that. And so it's kind of been percolating in the back of my mind and my thoughts for many years, but that's kind of where it stayed until last year. I started getting more interested in it when text to image AI came out, DALL-E was released. And then I really dug more deeply into it. I started working at an AI company called CopyLeaks, and what I've seen is this huge sort of eruption in interest and adoption of generative AI tools like ChatGPT, and I'm very excited about all of that. But I think from a really long-term view, we need to think really carefully about what these systems can do in the future and how best to maybe ensure that they're safe and able to provide the amount of real innovation and transformation that they can possibly provide. And so that's why I'm super kind of interested in this conversation and hoping to get other people more interested in the idea as well, because I think the biggest thing about alignment is that it should be something that is sort of co-determined by the public as well as institutions and things like that. So that's a little bit about, who I am, why I'm here, and what we might sort of talk about today.
Yeah. So Lee, let's just kind of create a definition of AI alignment for the sake of this conversation. So when you say AI alignment, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, AI alignment is really creating the rules, frameworks, data, and deployment of artificial intelligence systems such that they align with, and that's where the alignment part comes in, they align with human goals and values. I think one of the best examples, and it's sort of a thought experiment, is the paperclip example, where it's like a thought experiment where they say, okay, imagine that we created an AI system whose only goal was to make as many paperclips as possible, and it ends up sort of destroying the earth and everything to make optimal amount of paperclips, and how there wasn't a lot of forethought around that request of that system, and so it went kind of haywire, right? And it's an extreme example, but it's a good one for us to think about. What happens when we tell something to kind of do a thing, and we don't think about what it might try to achieve how it might try to achieve that goal. We need to be really sort of long term in our thinking about that stuff. So, yeah.
I think this is interesting. So my background is marketing. And so when I think of AI, I'm mostly thinking of the AI that has come to pass on marketing purposes. And one of those
Mhm.
things is content creation. So we
Yeah.
can do a lot, we can input things, and then the AI will output new things, new to some
Mhm.
degree based on the inputs.
Yeah.
And we can have really an infinite amount of content that's associated with that.
Yeah.
One of the things I see from a marketing perspective is that that's solving for what's not actually the problem. The
Mm.
problem isn't that we don't have enough content. The problem is probably something different. People aren't engaging in the content. It doesn't resonate. It's not in the right places. There's probably a bunch of other questions that we can
Mhm.
ask. And so when you think about AI alignment and the human goals, where does this start to break when the human goals actually aren't even aligned with the direction we're going?
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. I think maybe to step back for a minute. I mentioned the paperclip example, but here's an example around what happens when ChatGPT isn't fully aligned, right? Um, it, so, have you heard about hallucinations in AI in language models and chat? Yeah, so AI powered chatbots like Bard and ChatGPT. So they hallucinate, and part of that is because of that same kind of concept behind the paperclip thought experiment, which is
Hey, Lee,
uh,
sorry. I just want to make, I understand it, but maybe not everybody listening does. So
yeah,
maybe just give an overview of what that means.
sure, yeah. So um, so things like ChatGPT are basically an interface where you can talk to these AI systems. The AI systems are really trained on lots and lots and lots of words and data. And what the AI researchers and companies who have deployed these systems have found is that the more information and data that you train these big systems on, the more they're able to really get good at understanding the meaning and the concepts behind all of the text. And so um, a large language model is what powers ChatGPT. And like I said, these things are trained on all of this data, typically language. And so these language models are very large, and so they call them large language models. Short is LLM, and and what ChatGPT and Google Bard and all the other chatbots that are out there really are is just specifically fine-tuned models that you can interact with using natural language. So that's why you can type into it and ask it a question, and it will put out an answer, right? And with ChatGPT and these other, I call them AI-powered chatbots instead of calling everything ChatGPT because it's not the only thing that's really out there. So with all the AI-powered chatbots, they have one kind of flaw in common, is that their goal, instead of making as many paperclips as possible, their goal is to answer the question that you give it, or to complete the instruction that you give it. And the problem behind that is it will give you information that is not real because they are not really programmed to go, well, I don't know. They're programmed to give you an answer. And so if you put in, hey, tell me a lot of information about this person, this industry, this concept, and it doesn't have an answer, it will make one up, a really, really good, convincing answer. And that is a byproduct of the fact that we've made these systems to just answer the question. If you went through, Tracy, your day, and I said, listen, for 24 hours, you have to answer every question that anyone asks you. And they were like, hey, Tracy, how do I get to this place and what am I going to look for on the way, and what's the name of the building, and when was it built, and you have to answer the question. You're going to make things up because your instructions all day are to answer the question, right? So that's kind of one example. It's a real world example of how we see these things making mistakes and coming up with information that's not right, and having to step back and go, oh man, it's built into the system itself to only answer the questions, and because of that, it's gonna just make things up. We call it BSing when people do it. It's a very human type of thing, but it's
it's
that's
not
just what they do.
shocking actually that can happen because people do it too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Except now we don't know when people are doing it.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
when the AI is doing it. We think it's trustworthy advice, and
yeah,
it may or may not be.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think so. I'm talking about this example. This isn't necessarily alignment per se, but it's an example of how AI systems and their flaws can happen based on a lack of sort of forethought, or a lack of being able to predict what the outcome is going to be based on the system and how it's built, right? With alignment itself, I said, making sure that these systems are aligned with human goals and values. Now, that's the really tough thing. That's not an easy thing to solve for, and I think there's many reasons why. I think one of the first questions that someone would ideally ask is, what do you mean goals? How can a system have goals? Well, they just do. I mean, these systems are designed to be able to solve for a certain thing, to either be experts in a certain domain, to do a certain task. But even more than that, they're trained, and they're trained with rewards. And so the goal is to get the best and most rewards. So in some sense, they have goals, and in a very real sense, they're goal driven. And so we need to really think about what that means as we build these more and more powerful systems that are out there. I wrote a post yesterday about the state of AI right now, and I haven't been writing a whole lot about it because I haven't felt like there's been a whole lot new that's come out. Not to say that what is happening right now isn't incredible. I mean, I'm fully enamored and obsessed with AI, and I think it's super exciting. But there hasn't been a whole lot new that has happened that has been worth enough kind of like breathless posting, like in the first few months of the year. The first 4 months or so, I was writing every day about new things that was happening, but it's kind of slowed down a little bit. But like ultimately, when we're thinking about these systems, we're at a moment where we're kind of paused. Innovation is happening sort of in the background, but the way that these systems are built, and the big systems that drive ChatGPT or Google Bard, they haven't grown at all in the last couple of months, which is great. I think that's fine. There's plenty powerful as they are right now. But so right now we have a little bit of time, I think, to step back and go, okay, what is the next system going to potentially represent for people, and how should we think about that, and make sure that they're aligned properly, right? So the second part of the alignment question is aligning with human goals and values. Well, which humans? That's the other really tough part of this is people across different countries have different goals, different cultures have different goals, different states and provinces have different goals and values, different counties, different neighborhoods, different blocks, people within a family. There's all slightly different values and goals that people have. Values are not a universal, except for some very kind of fundamental, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness type of things.
Don't kill
Shouldn't.
people, right?
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. Don't kill. You should have access to food, shelter, education, healthcare. You shouldn't be restricted based on things about who you are. Everyone should sort of be treated equally. But those values aren't ubiquitous. They're not consistent all over the world, and because of that, we need to have some really tough conversations about um, where we think the best place to concentrate on alignment is. So yeah, it's a tricky one. Um,
So
I'm
Lee, how about if we just like we'll make it a little bit smaller for the sake of this conversation, and we leave global alignment for a later conversation, and we just look
sure.
at let's just look at like a business for
Mhm,
as a use case, right? So the
mhm,
business is has goals. A business
mhm,
has goals, but I can equally see if we're saying like our business goal is to make the most amount of money, and we tell an AI system to make the most amount of money, then we may or may not be following legal things, and we may or may not be doing what is in real alignment with the goals of the humans. We have like at least the experience of the humans.
mhm.
And so when we are talking about alignment, what do we need to look at in terms of due diligence, right? When we like set our goals, and if we're going to extrapolate those goals to an AI, what do we need to do from a due diligence perspective?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's not one that I'm going to be able to solve. But I
Yeah,
have
we
some
mostly just like open cans of worms here. So
yeah, good, good. There's going to be worms all over the place by the end of this. It's fine. Maybe we'll go fishing after.
yeah.
Um, I think so. It is a really good question because again, I'm getting very macro, but if we kind of narrow it down, you bring up a good point. Well, what about just from a business standpoint? Somebody wanting to leverage AI and have it make them the most amount of money. Um, and again, with alignment, I said, people aren't aligned all across the globe or anything like that, but we're not even aligned with our own governments about things or corporations and businesses around things, right? Um, so, I mean, I think one of the best things that a company can do or a business can do is have a set of guiding principles that they work by. Um, I also feel like um, there is a real opportunity to uh, take a step back and say, what does making the most money look like with leveraging AI? I think the danger here is a company, and there was an example I think maybe yesterday on Twitter. Somebody was like, "I fired 90% of my support staff and replaced them by AI." Um, I, I think companies need to really be careful about going, oh gosh, we've created so many efficiencies and sped up our ability to be productive that we now don't need human workers anymore. Um, that's very dangerous. And I actually think, from a regulation standpoint, that should not be legal. I think that as companies are able to apply extreme automation, leveraging AI systems, that's going to provide extreme supply and value at a very, very, very minimal cost. And so it should behoove the people who are leveraging these systems to have to account for that gain in efficiency and not be able to just get rid of workforces and human beings as a part of that uh, extreme automation, right? There are ideas out there that with every person who is um, losing a job because of automation, that they should be given equity and compensation around that that business decision. And there's a couple of really important reasons why. I mean, first of all, AI, if it goes how it maybe could, maybe should, maybe hope it will start to provide extreme amounts of efficiency and automation and supply. And when supply is huge, um, the idea of scarcity kind of goes away, and so that's kind of what's underpinning our whole economics and capitalism is supply and demand and scarcity and all those things. Well, if these systems are able to provide that amount of scale and automation, we can't just get rid of workforces. That's going to create a whole new class of humanity that doesn't have work. That's bad for basically every indicator that there is. But beyond that, let's just appeal to the greed of a company, and maybe a big giant corporation who would do something like that. Who's going to buy your products if everyone is out of a job and isn't making any money? So you need people to have money anyway, right? So that's that's kind of a larger scale component. Focusing it even more into the marketing landscape, I think the big thing that marketers are really interested in with AI is copy and being able to create copy, whether it is, branding, whether there's specific campaigns that they're writing, and all the different components that go into copy for a marketing agency. That's the big thing that is interesting, but I think it's a misstep to number one, to leverage these tools and then replace workers, right? I think instead you should say, okay, if we've leveled up in our ability to create content at scale, then we need to just create a lot of content. We shouldn't get rid of our copywriting team and just have like the leave one management person in place and then fire the whole team. Like that's really short-sighted. There's no guarantee that these systems are going to stay. There's no guarantee that they're going to be exactly the way that they are today in 10 years, 5 years, 1 year, 6 months. We don't really know. So we can't hang our hat and hitch our wagon and any other cowboy metaphor that you want to apply to that. It's a little shout out to Calgary. We shouldn't hang our hat on having these systems be able to do all these things at scale and automate that for us. There's no guarantee that is going to continue to be available for everyone. So that's one thing to really think about. And then, really thinking, hey, instead of, hey, we can save money on salaries, we can make everyone just a part-time consultant, freelancer, and then hire on when we need them. I think that's a big mistake. Companies that do that, it's very short-sighted, and I don't think that's the way forward at all.
Yeah. I'm hearing a lot of short-sighted from you, Lee. And I think when we talk about actual AI alignment, this is like a long-term strategy, right? This isn't like, okay, we got ChatGPT, let's get rid of all of our marketing copywriters and just have chat write that, because that might work. It might not work. There might have been a human touch that we didn't appreciate, or one of the things that I always think about is like, maybe people were engaging with that content because they like the people, because they know the people who are writing the content. And now if those people aren't writing the content, then maybe they don't care about the content. Again, these are just the questions, I think, when we make those like quick fire decisions where we're like, okay, this makes sense. But did we do the due diligence of actually, okay, if we choose this, what might happen? What do we do if there is a decrease in engagement? Then can we just hire all those people back if we treated them really terribly? Because they're probably not going to come back and work for us. I think there's a lot of cultural components that come into this. Like, are we going to do our due diligence? And one of the things that just came up for me is I feel like I don't need people. And we need people. And like there's people and organizations and cultures and probably even communities and countries, maybe even, although I don't know if it would go that big, that think like, we value our people. We want our people to do things that matter to them. We want our people to feel productive. We want our people to participate in our ecosystem, regardless of which ecosystem that is. And then there's people who are just looking for, I'm looking for ways to save money. And the number one place where I can do that is by getting rid of my people. And I wonder if in this is one of the complexities I see of the bigger AI alignment conversation, because we have both of those groups participating in society. And so I think there may always be people who are the I don't need people and the I don't need people companies. And if to some degree, maybe that's good, because they didn't really care about the people anyways. So the people working there probably didn't really enjoy it. We have to see what that does on an economic and financial crisis scale. But I do think that there's a wider group of people. Like the concerning group to me are the people who care about people, but they're making these short-term AI decisions without taking the people into consideration. And then it's going to be kind of heartbreaking in the long term, because we didn't think about this.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, one thing that I have been sort of touting for a while now is the importance of the human in the loop. That's going to be important, not just in the short term, but really from a long-term standpoint. We cannot rely fully on these systems without having some sort of oversight. Just setting an AI system off to do a bunch of things on its own is exciting, and that capability in some sense is there in some systems already, but to just set something off on a path to autonomously kind of do a thing without there being a human in the loop is a problem. And that's a problem when you're looking at AI being used in the military and for weapons, when it has to do with AI set up to manage the wastewater systems and for municipalities and infrastructure, but also even with copywriters. Like you can't just have an AI chatbot write a big article and then push it out and publish it without having human oversight. And we've seen countless examples of that happening. Whether it was
Tina shared one of those in the in the chat.
Yeah, exactly. So the lawyer thinking that AI chatbots are search engines. That's a big misconception. In fact, that's maybe the one biggest thing that I need to kind of yell from the rooftops to people is that they're not search engines. They don't go out, and most of them have no ability to search the internet. ChatGPT, its information ends at September 21st, September 2021. It doesn't have the pre-trained part of it. That information isn't updated beyond 2021 in September. So, even if it does have some information and can spit back out facts about certain things, it's not like a Google or a search engine. It doesn't come and grab information and bring it in. And this lawyer, who the guest just commented on here, is a great example of somebody going like, oh, wow, look at that. Oh, look at it. Gives you the cases and everything. Oh, wow. It's nice. And like I mentioned earlier, these systems are designed to answer questions. And so it'll be like, oh, yeah, that's reminds me of Barnaby versus Clark. That was argued in the municipal court in Pennsylvania in 2013. And, the court said, making all of this up, right? In the same way that the chatbot made it up. That's a big mistake. But if somebody who worked within the law firm, who is familiar with case law precedent, was to put a fine-tooth comb over that and go, okay, let me search for this. This doesn't exist anywhere in LexisNexis. It doesn't exist on the web. It doesn't exist within our own repository of cases. This doesn't look like it exists, period. This is not a real bit of information. This is a hallucination, right? So yeah, that's an important thing for people to really notice and know and understand about these things.
Yeah, I think so. I want to come to, there's a few comments in here that are Kind of related to our own perceptions of AI. So there's some things about how AI can be used for evil purposes, which, I mean, so can LinkedIn if we really want to get to it, right? Like we worry about identity fraud, right? In some of these things. And like that AI loses that personal that personal touch, right? So if I like the personal touch, then I would have this kind of maybe negative perspective of AI. And I want to talk about this for a minute because I think our perceptions control a lot of the things that happen for us as a human. And if our perception historically is that AI is dangerous or AI is out there creating fraud or can be evil or isn't good enough from a personal touch perspective, then how does that impact our ability to even get into the alignment conversation?
Yeah.
Because I feel like I feel like we wouldn't even bother having a conversation about AI alignment because we have such a bad relationship with AI. Like I think it's just no good. So I'm not gonna participate in that conversation. And I think like I have a 5-year-old and I've had people who have told me like, oh, you gotta protect him from this and protect him from that. And I'm like, dude, this kid is growing up in the age of AI. Right. Mm-hmm. Like, even if I don't allow it at home, which is stupid because I use my voice app all the time. Right. Yeah. And like, these are things that are connected to each other and he's going to grow up and this is just the world he lives in. I personally don't believe in like protecting ourselves from AI. Yeah. That's why we're having a conversation about AI alignment. But what happens when we try to like insulate ourselves from AI instead of having these types of conversations?
Yeah. I mean, I think first thing is there are these sort of knee-jerk reactions against all new technologies that come out from the printing press to written language to printing press to the radio to television to horseless carriages to the internet and everything, right? So there's a kind of knee-jerk reaction against new tech, and then I think next it's important to know about these tools because they're really not going anywhere. I don't think this isn't like a crypto thing. This isn't NFTs. This isn't like it feels like the same amount of buzz that came around those kind of technologies, but it's really not. AI systems exist already. We've been deeply impacted and influenced by AI, whether we realize it or not. The YouTube recommendation algorithm is a powerful, narrow-focused AI that essentially radicalized an entire sector of the population, and basically very easily put people into YouTube rabbit holes where they became radicalized based on the same kind of paperclip idea. Hey, YouTube, make sure that the viewers click to the next video and get the most engagement that there is. Doesn't matter what the video is. Oh, it happens to be the ones that are the most inflammatory or controversial or whatever. Who cares? Just get them to click, get them to click, get them to click. We're influenced by those things. Amazon. People buy things all the time on Amazon. They're recommended things on Amazon that many of them you would never have purchased on your own. But since it was put in front of you, you go, oh yeah, these are AI systems that are ubiquitous. They have been around for many years now, and they've had a material impact on the world. What's happened with AI-powered chatbots like ChatGPT is it's given people an opportunity to actually leverage AI themselves. And so I think it would be a mistake to prohibit yourself or your family to use them. I know that they're very, very easily going to provide misinformation, disinformation, propaganda at scale, all of those different things. But it's not impossible for us to protect against those different components. But you can't really protect yourself or anyone else if you don't understand even that the system itself exists or what they can do. So knowledge is power in this instance, right? I think I'm a parent myself, and I have a 9-year-old, and me and my wife have been very careful about exposing her too much to screens and to phones and especially social media. I think there's enough evidence and data out there that it's really negative, and it has negative impacts on mental health. It's not that she doesn't know what these things are and doesn't see us, on them occasionally and things like that, but she's not engaged in any of those things. She's, I believe, too young to be on social media. I believe too young to have her own phone. And even though I'm a very tech forward person and we're a very tech forward family, there's boundaries there. AI is a little different, though. I think here's an example. Every single night, I put my daughter to bed and we read a bedtime story, actually, 2 bedtime stories. The bedtime stories are completely unique stories based on a prompt that her and I came up with months ago. The chatbot has created a whole story line, a whole bunch of character ideas, character development, different situations, all really amazing stories. And every night I'll say, okay, now write one about, so it's basically my daughter is kind of the inspiration for the main character in it, and then she's got the cat and a dog, Misty and Max. Now, the AI chatbot called Claude came up with Misty and Max based on some things I told it about my daughter and what her preferences are and all that. And now we have a new Misty and Max story every night, actually 2 of them, and I write the prompts and I'll go from there. And it's incredible. It's so fun. I'm able to read her brand new, interesting stories every night that can be about whatever she wants them to be about, and it's super fun. I tell her how I'm writing the prompt and explaining how all that works, and she's getting a sense of how we're interacting with this AI to come up with a story, and it provides value for us, daily, right? So she's very excited and interested by the fact that I work in AI and that we use AI every night to listen to and to read those stories. So I'll read her the stories, but we develop them together. So that's providing a sense of literacy around what these tools can do, and providing a kind of fun context in order for her to understand and learn about how they work. So it's kind of a dual function there. One is, oh, I love that story. Every time we're finished, she's like, that was amazing. I'm like, right? Now, the stories are great, but her and I are creative. So we come up with very creative prompts to write these stories. I think that's the biggest part of it is, these systems right now are really only as good as you are at prompting them. And just for people, so people will understand, when I say a prompt, basically you type into a window what you want to achieve in these chatbots, and then when you press enter, the answer is called a completion. So it's all about writing the prompt. There are ways to write prompts to get the system to really be good at what you want them to do, and that's a whole other thing I won't get into because it's a little more deep in the weeds. But in this context, my child knows now what this AI chatbot is, what it can do, and how it's doing what it's doing, because she's participating in coming up with creative story ideas for the AI to actually write for us. So I'm creating that bit of awareness and education right now. And then, in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, the AI is going to be nuts. We're going to look back on now as a really quaint time. But I need her to understand more about those systems today, and not to be sheltered away from them. And I think people should take the opportunity to set up an account with a Google Bard, an Anthropic Claude, and OpenAI ChatGPT, and play around in all of them. They can be really amazing. And the kind of other part to this is, yeah, there's a big worry about propaganda and misinformation and all the rest of it, but the more you play with these things, the more you start to recognize maybe what an AI output really looks like. It's nobody or nothing can predict what an AI output is 100% of the time, but the company I work for can detect AI content, especially in specific domains, with very high accuracy. But people can even eyeball now, and I've gotten really good at seeing something going, that doesn't seem like a person wrote it. I'm going to go and take a look and actually validate it. I use our tool to validate it and go, oh, okay, I was right. Most of the time, I'm right. If I look at something and I spot check it and I go, that doesn't look right. I think it's important for people to really engage with these systems and understand how they work, what they look like, what their answers look like. Because if you don't build a literacy around these things and embrace them, and this folds back to even businesses and their goals. If you're not leveraging these systems, you're not even starting on equal ground. You simply will have to compete using AI because the next company is going to eat your lunch if you're not.
Yeah. Well, I think I really love that example with your daughter, because I think this is a great demonstration of AI alignment, right? If your goals as a family are to practice creativity, education is an important value, right? Connection between the two of you is an important value, then you have leveraged the AI to create what you're trying to create. And it's possible to do that. It's just also possible to leverage AI for other things. And there's that level of intention that needs to come into it, from whether that's from a personal perspective or from a business or from a governmental perspective. And if we're not getting the results that we hoped for, then maybe the problem is in the clarity of our goals instead of like the functionality of the AI.
Yeah. And I think alignment is the kind of conversation that I want to just scream from the rooftops, right? Like it's something that I'm very focused on building some awareness around it. And I think some of the topics that we've touched on here are really hopefully valuable for just the average person out there. But there are some even more grand ideas that, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to kind of talk about a little bit.
Before you jump into that, Lee, what was the third chatbot that you had mentioned? Anthropic Claude, is that?
Yeah. So Claude, CLAUDE, by a company called Anthropic. It's available in the US and the UK right now, and beyond that, it's restricted. I'm sorry, Tracy, unless you have a VPN.
No, so that might be Sam's problem too, because I know she's also in Canada. But
yeah. But I know that Google Bard is now opened up, and Google Bard is really great as well. But again, they're only as good as your interactions with them, right? So it just takes some playing around and maybe watch some YouTube videos or any endless amounts of posts on LinkedIn about the best prompts and here and there. And there are some really good instructional things out there. So yeah, sorry about that. I forgot that Claude just opened up to the public in the US and the UK. I keep forgetting it's not available everywhere. I'm excited for when it is, because it's really, I think, one of the best from a writing. Actually, scratch that. It is the very best writer of any of the AI chatbots out there by many measures. So it's really great. It's really great, and that's the one I use for the bedtime stories.
Yeah. Sorry. Back to the important things you want to talk about.
Well, so like we're talking now about these things being things that we interact with and that we type into, and they give us type output, or maybe you type in and it spits out music, or it spits out images, or you put in music and it makes different music, or you put in music and it makes text, or you put in images and it makes videos, or you put in videos and it gives you, like the ability to now use different modes of media and make them multimodal and all that. That's accelerating now. The really capable models, like the one from Google and the one from OpenAI, are multimodal, which means they don't just do text in, text out. They handle all kinds of different things: data, code, images, and everything else. We're at a pretty interesting point there. very soon, we're going to see more and more of the really staggering deployments of AI. Embodied AI is actually, I think, the most exciting and impactful type of AI that we're going to see continuing to flourish, and that's essentially embodying a robot with artificial intelligence. Um, some of the breakthroughs that have happened by embodying robots with AI, just called embodied AI, are really profound. Um, and that leads us to a really interesting question: is not if, but when we have to consider the idea of personhood and how we apply the idea of personhood to AI systems. That's going to happen. Um, and what I hope that does for us is, number one, make us reevaluate what our cultural blind spots are, and number two, make us reevaluate how we treat nature and animals in general. Because if we start, we'll be forced to consider the idea of personhood to AI. We're going to have to start looking at different examples of precedent where animals um, might need to be endowed with the same rights as a human being, and giving them the sense of personhood. And that's going to make us have to shift how we approach lots of different things. The industrialized farming and livestock, and all of those ideas. Number one, but beyond that, um, I can see people really pushing back on the idea of granting personhood to embodied AI robots. And I have to give you an example of why that's short-sighted. Um, Sony has these robot dogs, the Aibo dogs. I don't know if you've seen them. They've been around for many, many years now. They're little robot dogs. Um, they're smart, little, mechanical, electronic pet dogs. They've been around for many, 15, maybe 20 years, something like that. And they were very popular all over, but also very popular in Japan. And what you saw in Japan was that there were many elderly couples who had these pet dogs, the Aibo robot dogs, for a very long time. But Sony ended up discontinuing them. And so they discontinued them. And then at a certain point, they stopped supporting repairs and warranties on them. Because of that, there were independent certified repair shops that would repair your Aibo dog, and eventually they ran out of new parts. And so what happened in Japan was you started to see these whole generations of these robot dogs were dying. Basically, they would stop functioning. And in Japan, um, these elderly couples were joining these mass funeral ceremonies for the Aibo, because in Japan they believe that everything has a piece of soul in it, and that goes for these AI robots, or the Aibo dogs. That goes for anything. They believe that a soul is not something that is just a characteristic of a human being, right? This is a cultural belief that exists, that is beautiful, that deserves respect and attention uh, globally, and also makes me realize that once we have to start confronting the idea of personhood in AI, we're going to have to realize that some cultures already would have no problem ascribing a soul to what we would consider an inanimate thing. In Japan, they don't believe that these AI or these robot dogs are just batteries and electronics. They had a soul, and they deserved a proper funeral and everything else. Um, if those goals are so much different than other people's goals and or beliefs and values, then the alignment problem is something we need to start getting to work on right now. If it's a big surprise to you that people in Japan believe that everything has a soul, that's all the more reason for us to have these kinds of conversations now. Um, once we do, we'll start realizing that we actually have a lot of work to do on just what we think about it means, what it means to be intelligent, to be conscious. These are not settled questions. We've been working on those questions very seriously for over 2,000 years. We're not really super far from where we started with Aristotle, even the pre-Socratic Greeks, and even longer. We've been trying to muster up a consensus on what we believe it means to be intelligent, to be conscious, and we don't really understand that. We're going to have to figure out what we think about these things sooner than later. And philosophy, like I mentioned earlier, is the thing that I studied in college, is becoming ever more relevant because as we confront the complexity and capabilities of these systems, we're going to have to reconsider or continue to consider what our beliefs are about all these things. So, this isn't just a matter of, how can my agency start leveraging AI to kind of 10x our output? Those are important questions and things that right now you can think about, and you can come up with standards and beliefs and guiding principles around how to leverage those things. But we need to think long horizon, and that's an AI term, and I like that term. Some of these embodied robots, they can do long horizon tasks, which means you can tell them to do, go to the kitchen, find a bag of chips in the drawer and bring them back to me. And that's a whole bunch of different questions and commands. And that's a long horizon task that it does. Well, we need to have a long horizon view of what the future is going to look like with these systems and the kinds of questions that we're going to be confronted with that we can't walk away from, that we can't ignore. We need to really, run full steam ahead at these questions and come up with really meaningful answers around them and agree. We're going to have to learn to agree. That's maybe the biggest challenge of all, is learning to agree.
Yeah, and we all could do some work on that, I'm sure. One of the things that is just coming up for me in this like concept of short-sightedness in relation to immediate gratification. Mm-hmm. And so do you see that we need to, as the human component, adjust our expectations from an immediate gratification point of view in order to look at some of these long horizon questions? Or how can these two things live together if they're not mutually exclusive? That's probably another can of worms, but
yeah, I mean, I think it's always good advice to adjust our expectations. It really reminds me of even some of the ways that people are reacting now to AI chatbots and going like, oh, it's stupid, or just doesn't do what I want to fast enough. And it's like, remember 9 months ago when this didn't exist in your life, and somehow a magical wizard in a box can now give you answers and write things for you, and like easy.
Remember 25 years ago when we had dial-up internet and it would buffer and buffer?
Yeah. Almost getting beat up by my brother every time I picked up the phone because it was like, he's like, hey, idiot, what do you? He's got to restart his dial-up connection, I do remember that. Yeah.
How short-sighted we can be.
Right. Yeah. No shade on my brother, but yeah. Who lives in Edmonton,
we all had that
by the way.
With siblings during dial-up. It's fine. We love you, and it was dial-up. What are you gonna do?
Yeah. That's right. I didn't know any better.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, like most conversations on the show, I feel like we could talk about this for a very long time. Lee, for the people who are listening and people in the chat, where is the best place for them to find you if they want to stay involved in this conversation about AI alignment?
Yeah, I would say, you can follow me on LinkedIn. It's just Lee Gaul, Leegaul. And then I would suggest actually also, maybe setting up a Google alert and following a little bit about what's happening from a regulation standpoint for AI alignment. There are whole nonprofits and organizations that are thinking deeply, and think tanks that are thinking deeply about AI alignment. There are companies who are doing great jobs. So again, I mentioned Anthropic and Claude. They have their AI is run on a thing called constitutional AI, and they're very aligned. It's very safe, helpful, harmless AI, and they've come up with some great innovations on how they steer their language model to be very aligned. And Google also does a wonderful job at expressing their principles around responsible AI. Microsoft actually has a pretty good one as well. OpenAI, like these big companies actually have some really well thought out ideas and principles around them, and I hope that it continues to be that way. So I would say just try to be as engaged in the topic as you can, or you just got to do one Google search, and then their AI algorithm will programmatically start serving you information about alignment, and you won't be able to get away from it. But either way, seek that out and follow me if you're interested, and look through my post history, because I've really kind of given a global kind of stance on my view of what's happening in this space, and I'll continue to do that. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. To make it easy, Lee is actually tagged in this post, so you can just click on his name and find him over there. And all of the other lovely people who are in the conversation today, Sam, Bernice, Andrew, we had some Tina. These are the types of people who are in the AI alignment conversation. So feel free to connect with each other to continue the conversation. I'm sure everybody has their different levels of knowledge and where that knowledge is coming from. And this is where we get to open cans of worms. This is our opportunity to explore, right? And at some point, yes, we're going to have to make some decisions on what it looks like for us individually, or what it looks for our businesses to be aligned with AI. And when we can get as much knowledge as possible in a reasonable amount of time, we can make better decisions in that arena. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you so much for sharing all your expertise today with us, Lee. And until next time, everybody, permission to do you.
Bye.